In 1966, Marvel Comics published a 2.5-issue Fantastic Four arc that introduced the world to King T'Challa of Wakanda, or, as he is better known, Black Panther. Black Panther was arguably the first black superhero, although arguments can be made that other characters like Ralph Jackson, Jackie Johnson, Gabe Jones, Whitewash Jones, or Lion Man are more deserving of that title. The first three all appeared before Black Panther, but in war comics, and I wouldn't consider them to be superheroes. Lion Man is a character pertinent to this video, whom I'll discuss later. As for Whitewash Jones, no. Just no, I'm not talking about him. Black Panther was created after artist Jack Kirby, or maybe Stan Lee depending on who you ask, realized that there weren't any black superheroes in Marvel Comics. To quote Kirby, "I came up with Black Panther because I realized I had no blacks in my strip. I'd never drawn a black. I needed a black. I suddenly discovered that I had a lot of black readers. My first friend was black, and here I was ignoring them because I was associating with everybody else. It suddenly dawned on me, believe me, it was for human reasons. I suddenly discovered nobody was doing blacks." I'm going to give Kirby a pass on phrasing things in a kinda racist way because, he was born in 1917 and was, although far from perfect, a genuinely progressive artist throughout his life, especially in times when other comic book writers and artists weren't. Fantastic Four number 52 begins with the Fantastic Four minus Johnny flying around in a hovercar sent as a gift from an African chieftain called the Black Panther. The Thing is shocked by this, saying, "How does some refugee from a Tarzan movie lay his hands on this kind of gizmo? Wow, Ben, that's really racist!" The trio meet with a representative from Wakanda, who invites them to come for a hunt. That isn't ominous at all. Reed, wanting a vacation, says yes. The representative takes a handheld transmittal out of his toga and calls back to Wakanda, which is apparently an island in the middle of wherever the hell that is. Like, seriously, is that supposed to be Africa? And why is the moon orange? Side note, I love the 1960s technology in this comic. Like, the representative's radio is supposed to be this advanced super communication device, and Reed is shocked that it is so small, but like every modern cell phone is smaller and more advanced. And you don't need to put on a weird headset thing to use them. Later in the story, it is shown that Black Panther is a genius scientist because he owns an electric computer! The story cuts to Wakanda, a small tribal nation in the middle of Africa. Wakanda is introduced as a nation of half-naked men in loincloths, holding spears, banging on animal skin drums, standing outside wooden huts with straw roofs, led by a mysterious chief who dresses up like a cat while he goes hunting. Wakanda, as it first appears, is admittedly kinda racist. It is steeped in the racist stereotypes of Africans that plagued comics of this era. But, in Kirby and Lee's defense, they do at least attempt to subvert these racist ideas. When the Fantastic Four arrive in Wakanda, they are shocked to find that hidden beneath the jungle is a high-tech city of metal and wires, shown with the same exquisite detail Kirby used for advanced alien civilizations. Black Panther reveals that he actually intends to hunt the Fantastic Four and quickly defeats all four members of the team. He wins through his martial ability, enhanced senses, and most notably, his brilliant scientific mind. Paired with men in loincloths beating on high drums are panels of Wakandan soldiers wielding sci-fi magnet guns. The Fantastic Four is saved by Johnny's friend Wyatt, who they brought along because reasons, causing Black Panther to surrender. In the next issue, Black Panther explains his backstory. Wakanda was once a stereotypical African tribe ruled by T'Challa's father, T'Chaka. A Belgian supervillain named Ulysses Claw came to Wakanda to steal their cache of vibranium, a super metal that does whatever the writers want it to do. Claw killed T'Chaka but fled after a young T'Challa shot his hand off. Headcanon, T'Challa could have shot Claw in the heart and killed him, but he deliberately aimed for his hand because he knew it would be funny if Claw got a robot hand, because, his name is Claw. After his father's death, T'Challa trained to become the superhero Black Panther. He also became a genius scientist, transforming Wakanda into a high-tech superpower. Black Panther explains he fought the Fantastic Four to see if he was strong enough to defeat Klaw, which is admittedly a bit contrived. What's even more contrived is the fact that Klaw shows up again, right as T'Challa decides he's ready for another fight. Anyway, the Fantastic Four fight off Klaw's sound monster things, while Black Panther defeats the villain by sabotaging his technology, again winning through his intelligence. Issue 55 acts as an epilogue to the Black Panther arc. Although most of the issue is spent on Johnny saving the Inhumans, the opening pages of the story show Black Panther playing baseball with the team, saying that this will never replace lion hunting, and inviting the team to relax in his mansion. Mr. Fantastic states that it's hard to believe that a scene like this could be taking place in the heart of the jungle, which is kind of fucking racist. Wyatt does say that the talent of inventive genius is not limited to any one place, culture, or clime, though, which is, it's something. Black Panther, as he appears in those first few issues, is a flawed attempt at a black superhero. He is portrayed as an outlier in a version of Africa just as racist as those by earlier writers. But, in Kirby and Lee's defense, at least they were trying to make a progressive character. They may have used racist stereotypes, but at least they attempted to push back against them. Black Panther was an attempt at making a good character, and from the groundwork laid by that attempt, later writers were able to flesh out T'Challa and Wakanda, transforming them into far more than outdated stereotypes. Now that's what Marvel was doing in the 60s. At the same time, DC Comics also had an idea for an animal-themed superhero living in Africa. While Marvel decided to create the first black superhero, DC had a very different idea. DC Comics saw Black Panther and said, "Hey, that's cool, but what if he was white?"
Jambo bwana, habari gani, nzuri sana.
Showcase was a DC Comics anthology that ran from 1956 to 1978. The idea behind Showcase was to use it to introduce new, exciting superheroes. Like Fred Farrell Jr., the hero of issue 1. He's a firefighter. He doesn't, have any powers or anything. He puts out fires, though. Very good start to your new superhero anthology, DC. To be fair, Showcase was overall very effective at testing out new characters. Barry Allen, the Silver Age Flash, debuted in issue 4. Hal Jordan debuted in 22. Ray Palmer in 34. Hawk and Dove debuted in 75. Micheal Maxwell, aka Buona Beast, debuted in issue 66. This issue was written by Bob Haney, with art by Mike Sekowsky. Bob Haney was a very prolific DC writer, best known for being a writer on The Brave and the Bold, another DC anthology. He also co-created the Teen Titans. Mike Sekowsky also worked on The Brave and the Bold, during which time he helped to create the Justice League. After the Justice League was spun off into its own series, he was the main artist for years. Haney and Sekowsky were both incredibly influential men in the history of superhero comics. I couldn't find much from either of them about what inspired the creation of Buona Beast, although, given the Beast's less than savory characterization, I assume they preferred to be remembered for other work. The cover of Showcase 66 shows a masked, shirtless man punching a purple gorilla so hard it causes an explosion. Large red, tiger and leopard print text shouts the name of this new hero. Buona Beast, the Jungle Master! An arrow pointing to an injured man states, "His name invokes terror, ... and only this man knows his secret!" Side note, this cover is lying. The gorilla fight happens in a cave, not the jungle, and Michael doesn't put on the helmet until after the fight. This is a bigger lie than the cover where Superman murders Lois Lane for not marrying him. The inside page introduces Rupert Kemboya. Side note, I don't think Kemboya is a real Tanzanian surname. The only things that came up when I googled it were this character and a life coach from Oakland. She sued Nissan in 2020, apparently. I wonder if they just added letters to Kenya and decided, yeah, that's a real name. Rupert says, Jumbo, that's a Swahili greeting, by the way. Hello from Africa, because, people tend to refer to where they live as the continent, not the specific city or at least the country. Rupert Kemboya, Zambezi tribe, State University 61 speaking. First off, that sentence is a mess. Second, he attended State University? That's wonderfully non-specific. Meet my Africa of today and yesterday. What? Welcome to the origin story of the outlaw hero who is already a living legend. Bold to claim that on your first issue. The man whom I, against my will, must hunt down or die. Begin it here, the greatest adventure safari of them all, from Kilimanjaro to the mountains of the moon. Time. Pause. The mountains of the moon? When does Buona Beast go to the mountains of the moon? Seriously, I have read literally every single appearance of Buona Beast. He never visits the moon. He visits low Earth orbit years later in Crisis and on Justice League Unlimited, but never the mountains of the moon. The comic proper opens with the following narration. Africa, mother of man, continent of fantastic mysteries, last home of high adventure, where today the Zambezi tribe has something to dance about. Ah, look, it's men in loincloths with spears and drums who live in huts. I wonder if, like in Black Panther, the comic will reveal that they're more interesting and complex than they first appear. What's that? They aren't? The comic is just super stereotypical all the way through? Well, shit, that's boring. And really racist, but also really boring. The Zambezi tribe is cheering because of the return of Rupert, son of Chief Kilo Kemboya. Kilo says Rupert's return is a good omen. Rupert dismisses this as quaint superstition. Rupert says, as the new police commissioner, he'll make sure a copper ore delivery is successful. Kilo says, while his son is educated in foreign ways, the old ways retain their powers. Then he says something that I'm not sure what it means. Dewey Rocky? That isn't Swahili as far as I can tell. Like, this comic ostensibly takes place in Tanzania, where English and Swahili are the main languages, and characters occasionally drop bits of Swahili in this comic, but Dewey Rocky isn't Swahili. Or any language, according to some cursory Googling. A witch doctor warns of great danger for Rupert. Rupert dismisses seeing the future as nonsense, saying that his Harvard professors would laugh. Wait, I thought he attended State University. Rupert says that it's a new Africa and that the old ways are of no use anymore. He fires his gun in the air, which is needlessly reckless when you're surrounded by a crowd of people, and leads the men towards the coast with the copper ore shipment. Kilo offers Rupert a golden spear for protection, but Rupert dismisses this as more superstition. Except, this is the DC universe, where magic and the supernatural both exist and are widely known to exist. That spear never appears again, but it probably had the power to turn Rupert into a godlike metahuman or something. I'd like to take a moment to talk about Rupert Kemboya as a character, and what he represents. Rupert is a man from this stereotypical tribal Africa who traveled to the United States and was educated at a prestigious American university. The scene with him and his father is hinged on this tension over African traditions. Or rather, what Haney and Sikowski thought African traditions were. After this opening, there are two ways you could take this character. On one hand, you could show him to be right. You could have him become the protector of his people thanks to his time in the West, making him more quote-unquote civilized. That'd be kind of racist, but it would be a consistent story. It would say that tradition is foolish and people need to move towards the future. On the other hand, you could validate the traditions, have Rupert learn his father is right, and protect his homeland through the traditions he once forsook. Those are two possible central themes, two roads this book could take. It could promote Western modernity, or it could appeal to ancient traditions. And this comic decides boldly to say, what the fuck is a central theme? As Rupert and the miners are leaving the village, we are introduced to American Game Ranger Mike Maxwell. Mike shouts, "Good heavens, it's him!" and hops in his helicopter. He flies to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro, where he meets with Juba, his hyper-intelligent gorilla sidekick. Mike drinks an elixir handed to him by Juba and puts on his magic helmet, becoming a being so unique that all of Africa trembles at his name, Buona Beast! Okay, no. Africa is a big continent. 200-odd million people lived there in the 60s. You're telling me that people in Cape Town and Casablanca tremble at the name Buona Beast. Him being a big shot regionally, that I can buy, but there's no way this guy was famed across the continent. Buona Beast runs to the ore trucks and attacks them with an elephant, and a buffalo and a rhino. Using his ability to control animals, Wannabeast knocks over the ore trucks. He then steals some of the ore and starts carrying it to the coast. As the workers are standing next to the overturned trucks, a man with white hair and skin appears. Not white like Micheal Maxwell's white, like supernatural white. This is our introduction of Hamid Ali, aka He Who Never Dies, Wannabeast's arch enemy. The workers shoot at him, but this doesn't work because He Who Never Dies doesn't die when you shoot him. Hamid Ali realizes the ore was stolen by Wannabeast and chases after him in his giant robot crocodile tank. What? Why is this man robbing trucks? He's an immortal scientist with giant robot tanks. He could conquer the country in a day. Hamid Ali also destroys some of the other trucks. Like he doesn't rob them, he destroys them. Just to be petty, I guess. In the second issue, Ali says he's keeping the Zambezi poor so he can exploit them. But I mean, he has a giant robot crocodile tank. They have spears. He could just take over using force. Also, again, this theme of tradition versus modernity is muddled. You have an American with ancient tribal magic powers versus a local who drives a crocodile tank. What does this comic have to say? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Rupert arrives at the scene of the crime and insists that Hamid Ali isn't immortal, calling the workers ignorant children. Rupert's a bit of a dick, considering the fact that there are dozens of millennia-old supervillains in DC Comics. Meanwhile, Hamid Ali chases after Wannabeast. While the elephant runs ahead with the ore, Wanna fights Ali using his coolest power, Chimera Creation. Wannabeast fuses the rhino and the buffalo together into a giant green monster that slams into Hamid Ali's tank. And honestly, this is the best trait of Wannabeast. Creating giant animal fusions is a cool power. Anyway, Hamid Ali tries to kill Rupert, Wannabeast saves him. Then, when Rupert's partner tries to kill Bwana, Rupert saves him back. We then get the beginnings of a flashback that shows the origins of Wannabeast. Micheal Maxwell and Rupert Kimboya were best friends in college. After graduating, Rupert invited Mike to come back to wherever the hell this is, Africa, to work as a game ranger. Mike said yes, and as they were flying over Mount Kilimanjaro, their plane crashed near the summit. The comic then pauses for a bit to give us a prose section titled Wannabeast's Real Africa, because Bob Haney had no sense of irony. It reads, "The Dark Continent, Jungle, Heat. If these are some of the ideas that come to your mind when you hear the name Africa, forget them! These cliches don't tell us the story of the real Africa." And then it discusses how Africa is a big continent filled with diverse climates, which is true, but this comic takes place almost exclusively in a hot jungle. Yes, Africa is diverse. In particular, the continent's people are diverse, split between 55 countries with unique histories and cultures. But this comic shows none of that. It can't even be bothered to give a name to the country where it takes place. Like seriously, where does this comic take place? Tanzania makes the most sense, that's where Mount Kilimanjaro is, and the discussions of a new government track with Tanzania being established as a country in 1964. Tanzania was formed via the merging of Tanganyika with Zanzibar, a country ruled by an Arabic sultan, which might have inspired Hamid Ali's name and appearance. So, it's Tanzania, right? Except, it never says Tanzania. It says Africa, or if it's being specific, the part of Africa where the Zambezi tribe live. And Zambezi is the name of a different country in DC Comics. It's the birthplace of Vixen, and this country is called Zambezi in Animal Man. So it's Zambezi, right? Except later in Animal Man, they say Wannabeast lives in Tanzania. So where does Wannabeast live? Africa. He lives in Africa. Not any country in Africa, in the vague, ill-defined jungle that 1960s Americans thought of when they heard the word Africa. The page insert continues saying that Africa is changing. Since World War II, dozens of new nations have been formed out of old colonies and native domains. Modern ways are seen everywhere, from industry to the airplane, from medicine to rock and roll. Except in this comic, Africa hasn't changed. Two guys own a helicopter and that's it. It's still the same stereotypical tribal Africa. The comic states, yet much of Africa's 11 million square miles remains open, wild, untamed. And for anyone who might think that Africa's peoples represent some later or lower development of the human species, recent archaeological research has proven that the first true man on the scale of evolution were African, dwelling where the great animal herds now roam, and we all owe descent to them. Okay, you didn't need to stop and say, a lot of people think Africans are a lesser form of evolution. That just came out of nowhere. And refuting it by saying Africa is where the earliest, least advanced humans came from it's a cartoonishly bad way to make that point. The page ends by saying that the comic features the hashtag #RealAfrica before boldly proclaiming that Wannabeast is DC's greatest new hero and will be starring in every issue of this comic. And no, that isn't how an anthology works. Also double no, because Wannabe sucks and was dropped from Showcase after 2 issues. Back in the flashback, Mike is knocked out by the plane crash. Rupert carries him into a cave for shelter. There, Rupert finds some water dripping from the cave's walls, which he gives to his unconscious friend. A purple gorilla shows up and Rupert punches it in the face to protect Mike. An act of selfless heroism. He gets his ass kicked, sure, but he tried to save his friend. Then Mike wakes up and beats up the gorilla. Apparently, the random rainwater gave him super strength. The ape rewards Mike's victory by giving him a magical helmet that gives him the ability to control and fuse animals. Using his new powers, he learns that the gorilla's name is Juba. Rupert suggests Mike use his new powers to protect whatever country this takes place in, and Mike accepts this duty, deciding to become a super troubleshooter. God, I love super troubleshooter comics. Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, all of them are amazing super troubleshooters. And so began the fantastic life of the one destined to become the living legend of today's Africa, the man the natives christened Wannabeast. Hey, pause for a moment. What does wanna mean? I should look that up. The word wanna means master. Ah, that's not great. Let's see. Historically, it was used by European colonizers, and in the era this comic came out, would be better translated as slave master. Jesus fucking Christ. No. Okay, I'm gonna say no. You can't just have a scene where a bunch of people in a recently independent British colony point at your white superhero and shout, Slave Master! Look, it's Slave Master! Praise be the name of our hero, Slave Master! Okay, you can't do that! What the actual fuck, DC? So, I feel like this is as good of a time as any to explain why Wannabeast is such a racist idea. First off, as I've already discussed, it's a very stereotypical take on Africa. And Tanzania wasn't huts and spears in the 60s. This is what Tanzania looked like. As is this, and this, and this. They had cities, because of fucking course they did. It was 1967. And I discussed this at length in the Team America video, but how media portrays the world affects how we think of it. The real Africa of Wannabeast isn't how Tanzania looked at the time. The version of Africa shown is a theme park ride. It's a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox of what racists in the 18th century thought Africa was like. Never updated because, it's not like things change in Africa. It's Africa! Haney and Sikowski didn't research Tanzania before making this comic. They just used outdated stereotypes. They wrote a comic about Africa and treated its people as an amorphous blob, fully separate from history or nuance, less people and more walking stereotypes. And, to be fair, Kirby and Lee did the same thing. Fantastic Four 52 and 53 are really racist. But at least there's an attempt to make Wakanda something different. They failed, but they tried. I get it, this comic was written in the 60s. I'm not expecting it to be woke by modern standards. But even when compared to other comics of the 1960s, Wannabeast falls short. The other big problem with Wannabeast is the big big white savior overtones. Micheal Maxwell is a white American, and that's fine, all of great superheroes are white, but Wannabe sticks out like a sore thumb in this comic. He is a white American who is the chosen protector of a vague African nation. The people of Pseudo-Tanzania, which again had just achieved independence from the British Empire, need this white guy from the US to step in and save them from problems they can't solve on their own. I don't know or really care what Haney and Sikowski's intent was. Personally, I don't think they were making a statement with this comic, because they clearly did not put much thought into it. But regardless of intent, the comic's message is clear. Africa is an uncivilized wasteland that needs rich white Westerners to come in and lead it. And fuck it, let's call him Slave Master Beast, because it's the Silver Age, and subtlety has not been invented yet. The most disappointing thing about this story is that, I shit you not, it could have been good with one small change. Make Rupert the hero. Like seriously, why isn't he the one given the mask? He crashes on a frozen mountain, digs his friend out of the wreckage, drags him to safety, and then fights a gorilla even though he's clearly outmatched to protect his friend. Rupert Gamboa shows far more heroism than Micheal Maxwell during the flashback. Mike becomes a superhero because he drinks some water while unconscious. And honestly, making a comic in the 1960s where a black man works his ass off and loses to a trust fund white guy who didn't do jack shit is perfectly on the nose. You can make an argument that it was a form of social commentary if you also ignored everything else that happens in this comic. And making Rupert Gamboa the super troubleshooter would open so many storytelling possibilities. He's already a more complex character than Mike in this comic, what with his tense relationship with his father and his dismissal of the supernatural. If Rupert wore the mask, you could get some solid storytelling out of him embracing his heritage and his father's mysticism that he once mocked. Instead of having muddled themes about the contrast between Western modernity and African traditions, this comic would take a clear stance that there is value in other cultures. And you could still have Mike Maxwell as a character. The idea of an antagonistic cop who's secretly working with the hero is solid. Hell, what if instead of taking place in a real country the writer couldn't be bothered to research, this comic clearly took place in a fictional country still under colonial rule? Have Wannabeast be a local folk hero fighting against oppression, and have the colonial government send Mike to stop him. Instead of the villain being a weirdo supervillain stealing ore, have it be a Western company extracting resources and killing anyone who gets in their way. A very realistic story in colonial Africa. Have Rupert protect his people and Mike begrudgingly hunt his friend. That would be a more interesting story. To be clear, it would still be horribly racist, because it would still be made by Haney and Sikowski, who made this trash. But it would be Black Panther levels of racism, the type that better writers could iron out of the character down the line. There's one other good reason Wannabe should have been a black superhero. Because DC didn't have one yet. Marvel debuted Black Panther in '66, but DC didn't have a costume black superhero with the code name until 1970, when they introduced Flipper Dipper! Flipper Dipper, DC's first black superhero. Not Black Lightning, not Jon Stewart. The first black DC superhero was Flipper Dipper, a friend of Jimmy Olsen, whose powers included owning a diving suit and being named Flipper Dipper. Mal Duncan technically appeared half a year earlier, but he didn't get powers and a codename until 1976. Flipper Dipper, a character who should be remembered in the same breath as Black Panther. Actually, you know what's interesting? Flipper Dipper was created by Jack Kirby, as were Viking and Black Racer, the second and third black costume DC heroes. Flawed as the man was, Kirby was very dedicated to diversity in comics in an era where other people at DC were creating characters like Wannabeast, or the Black Bomber, a white racist who turned into a black man when he got angry, like the Hulk if he was created by the KKK. Or writing stories where Lois Lane does blackface. The sad thing is, the Lois Lane blackface comic is less racist than this one. Back in the racist comic, we see a flashback of Rupert arresting a bunch of poachers defeated by Wannabeast. The poachers happen to work for Hamid Ali, who in addition to owning a giant robot crocodile, controls a vast network of poachers, apparently. The president of whatever country this is orders Rupert to arrest Wannabes for a bunch of crimes he didn't commit. Mike suggests giving up being Wannabes because Mike sucks, and then the comic just kinda ends. There's a part 2, but first I'd like to talk about another character. Lion Man, the first black superhero. Maybe, depending on how you define the word superhero. In 1947, African-American journalist Orrin Evans created All Negro Comics, a comic anthology written by Africans about Africans. The comic featured Ace Harlem, a famed detective, a weird comic about a mermaid and an angel, a comic that is a send-up to Negro minstrels, his words, not mine, and a comic about Lion Man, an African warrior who protects a magic mountain on the Gold Coast. Lion Man was created by George Evans Jr. Lion Man, real name never mentioned, is an American scientist sent by the UN to guard a massive deposit of uranium, which is enough to make an atom bomb that could destroy the world! Lion Man, weirdly, lives in a straw hut and is half naked all the time. Like, he's an American. This isn't a cultural thing, or even what Americans thought was cultural. Someone told Lion Man that he was going to be stationed on the Gold Coast, and he decided, okay, I am not going to wear a shirt. Lion Man lives with an orphan named Bubba, who has major Megamind head and is also the worst character that anyone has ever created. The little brat sets Lion Man on fire while he's sleeping. While chasing after Bubba, Lion Man discovers that an evil scientist named Dr. Sangro has come to steal the uranium. Lion Man beats the shit out of Sangro, but the doctor escapes when Bubba shoots at Lion Man with a machine gun! What the hell, Bubba? The comic ends, telling the reader to watch for further adventures of Lion Man in the next issue of All Negro Comics! There was only ever one issue of All Negro Comics because racist distributors refused to let Orrin Evans buy newspaper materials. Lion Man isn't great. I mean, the writing is nothing special, but more than that, it falls into some of the same stereotypes I've been talking about. Offhandedly mentioned to be American or not, we still get the half-naked man in a straw hut. The comic was written by an American. An African-American, but an American nonetheless, influenced by the same American cultural views of Africa. Second, notice how similar elements of this comic are to Fantastic Four 52 and 53. Lion Man, a scientist living in Africa protecting a precious mineral deposit, is a proto-Black Panther. He never does any science and lacks the cool costume, but Lion Man comes from the same ideas as Black Panther. The other thing I realized reading this story is that there was only ever one story American writers wrote about Africa in this era. A story centered on the fact that there is some valuable resource in Africa, whether it be uranium or vibranium or copper ore or animals to poach, and someone from the West wants to steal it, so a single local hero fights them off. The Thing even points this out in that Fantastic Four arc, comparing Black Panther's backstory to that of a Tarzan movie. And as indelicate as his language is, Ben Grimm has a point. Black Panther is very similar to Lion Man. Black Panther also has similarities to Waku, an African Marvel character from the 50s, who was the son of an African chief in stereotypical tribal jungle Africa and is forced to take over after his father dies. American comic writers for a very long time were only able to tell one story about Africa. But why? I mean, racism is the answer, but why can't you tell more stories that take place in Africa? What about an alien baby crashing down in the countryside, him being raised by kindly farmers, and growing up to be a beacon of hope and justice is uniquely American? What about a group of people born with mutations that give them superpowers, leading to hate and fear from the general public, could not take place in Africa? What about a forensic scientist gaining super speed from a lab accident? Or aliens choosing a hero for his willpower? Or a man who turns into a big green monster when he gets angry? Is so grounded and America-centric that it couldn't take place on the continent of Africa. Wannabes is the same story we've heard 100 times. The only difference is that he's a mighty whitey American rather than a local. There isn't much to say about part 2 of the Wannabe story. He fights Hamid Ali, we see Micheal Maxwell without the normal shadow his helmet makes, which is weird. It's revealed that Wannabe stole the ore and wrecked the trucks, not because he's a criminal, but because he wanted to stop Hamid Ali from stealing it. That was a dumb plan. Also, a reporter love interest for Wannabe shows up. She figures out that Mike is Bwana because he wrote out lab notes on how his powers work. And also, the only other white men in the country are Hamid Ali's bandits. Not exactly groundbreaking detective work. Long story short, Wannabeast's elephant delivers the ore, Hamid Ali runs away, and the Zambezi chant, "The Zambezi hail Wannabeast! The Zambezi hail Wannabeast! This comic's terrible! This comic's terrible!" If there is one thing I can give these two issues credit for, it's the existence of Rupert Kenboya. Rupert is, admittedly, one of the earliest positive portrayals of black people in DC Comics. He's portrayed as being Mike's equal in college and saves Mike's life multiple times. If the rest of the book wasn't horribly, horribly racist, Rupert would probably be remembered in a positive light. The other good thing about Wannabeast is that his powers are interesting. But interesting powers aren't enough to save Wannabeast as a character. He never again appeared in Showcase. Mike Sekowsky refused to draw him again because he thought the character was too racist, and admittedly, he was right. Wannabeast could be seen in a few crowd shots in Crisis on Infinite Earths, but then again everyone showed up in Crisis. Freddie Farrell Jr. showed up in Crisis. With the death of the old DC universe, it seemed like Wannabeast would be forgotten as a Silver Age oddity, similar to other Showcase heroes like Harry Fowler or the Maniacs. The thing is, there's a very prominent DC writer famed for taking Silver Age oddities and making them work.
Jumbo Bwana.
Wannabeast's most notable post-crisis appearances came in the pages of Animal Man, where writer Grant Morrison reshaped him into a complex, dark character and stripped away a lot of the racism. However, the first appearance of Wannabeast in the new continuity actually came from the second issue of DC Challenge, written by Len Wein, with art by Chuck Patton and Mike DiCarlo. The idea behind DC Challenge was that every issue would be created by a different writer/artist team, ending on a cliffhanger for the next team to solve. I'm not going to recap all of DC Challenge because it's long and overcomplicated, but during the second issue of the miniseries, Mike Maxwell opens an exhibit at the San Diego Zoo with help from Congo Bill. For context, Congo Bill, aka Congorilla, is a C-list DC hero who has the ability to swap his mind with that of a golden gorilla. The exhibit shows off Bill's gorilla and Juba, because they are two of the world's most intelligent apes. And no, they aren't. There's an entire city of talking gorillas smarter than these two. Suddenly, an earthquake happens, and a giant purple monster named the Manticore bursts from the earth. Yeah, I got nothing. Wannabeast and Congorilla fight the Manticore with help from a cameraman who is also a genie. The comic ends with the Manticore about to kill Wannabeast and Congorilla as the genie flies away. In the next issue, Wannabeast defeats the Manticore by fusing it with Congorilla. Wannabeast undoes this immediately, but the Manticore is so weirded out that it flies away. To be honest, I only skimmed the rest of DC Challenge, so I do not know the significance of any of this. DC Challenge is weird. Hitler shows up, Aquaman gets lost in the desert, the whole thing is weird. Wannabeast has a brief cameo in issue 11, as one of the people whose souls the Spectre drains to give himself a power boost so he can stop two universes from fusing, but other than that, he isn't very important to the overall story. Next, Wannabeast appeared in a crowd shot in a non-canon gag story tacked on at the end of Outsiders issue 6. As I stated previously, the revamp of Micheal Maxwell as a character occurred primarily under Grant Morrison's pen, and that is true. However, the beginnings of Wannabeast's darker characterization first appeared in Swamp Thing Annual Number 3, written by Rick Veitch. In this story, Flash villain Gorilla Grodd uses his psychic powers to mind control all of DC's hyper-intelligent gorilla characters, including Gorilla Boss, Mala, Sam Simeon, and Congorilla. DC has a lot of gorillas, okay? While this is going on, the comic cuts to Africa. Micheal Maxwell is driving a South African archbishop and activist to meet with Wannabeast. Mike questions why the priest believes in Wannabeast, whose powers are centered on a tribal tradition. The priest explains that Wannabeast has been a part of Zambezi culture since before Cain slew Abel. Not sure what troubleshooting the beast did before the invention of crime, though. Mike, to cover his secret identity, pretends to be apathetic towards Wannabeast. The duo arrive at the mountain and Juba shows up to give Wanna his potion. That's a thing I haven't mentioned yet. Wannabe's powers wear off after like an hour if he doesn't drink the cave water, which is a super lame weakness. Mike describes Juba as his little princess and... okay, two things. In Showcase, Juba was male. Is this a retcon caused by Crisis, a mistake, or is Juba trans? I don't know how I feel about the idea of DC's first trans character being Wannabe's gorilla sidekick. Juba probably isn't trans. But I mean, the idea of a gorilla being a queer character isn't absurd in DC Comics. One of the first superhero comics to feature a gay relationship was Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol run, where Mala and the Brain became a couple. Yes, the French Brain in a jar and his pet gorilla were among the first openly gay DC characters. Not the first, though. That title goes to Extrano, who is Doctor Strange, except Hispanic and very, very stereotypically gay. He died of AIDS after being given it by a white supremacist vampire. So the other weird thing about this page is that Juba kisses Mike on the cheek, and their interactions seem vaguely romantic. Is Wannabeast having sex with his gorilla sidekick? I think he is. This comic also features Swamp Thing's relationship with his human wife, Sam Simeon being really, really into his human partner, and Mala and the Brain driving around in a tank. I think Wannabeast is dating a gorilla. And I mean, this is Swamp Thing. There's that famous scene where Batman points out that Lois Lane and Superman are technically bestiality. But still, it's an odd thing to add to the Wannabeast mythos. Wannabeast appears before the bishop, riding in on a Pegasus. The priest states that a civil war is coming, one that will kill countless innocents, and that he fears what they must become in order to overthrow their oppressor. He asks Wannabeast to help. Wannabeast states that he doesn't get involved in politics. The priest states that this isn't politics. It is slavery, murder, greed, but mostly it is suffering. The beast states, for good or bad, governments have to be run by the will of the people, not by a few with special powers. Wannabeast has an inkling of a point. It isn't good for superheroes to take over the government and rule as dictators. But there's a big difference between going full Justice Lord and fighting against a brutal apartheid government. Yes, countries should be ruled by the will of the people rather than the will of a handful of strong men with superpowers. But South Africa wasn't ruled by the will of the people in 1987. Most of the country wasn't legally allowed to vote, because it was a white supremacist apartheid state. What is, materially, the difference between a murderer dressed in a goofy costume and a murderer working for the state? If the point of superheroes is to fight evil, doesn't the latter apply just as much as the former? And the thing is, superheroes get political all the time. I've spent 2.5 hours pitifully ranting about that in the past. The problem is, more often than not, the involvement superheroes take in politics is primarily to uphold the status quo. To be clear, I am not criticizing Rick Veitch. Wannabeast is supposed to be in the wrong, and this issue does a great job setting up his character arc that would continue on in Animal Man. Anyway, as Mike and the Archbishop are driving away, the priest calls the experience disturbing because Wannabeast is white. As Michael is contemplating the priest's words, Juba attacks him, stealing his helmet and car, leaving him wounded in the wilderness. Juba delivers the elixir to Grodd, and the cave water amplifies Grodd's powers so much that he knocks himself out. The comic cuts back to Mike, dying as he tries to climb Kilimanjaro. He thinks to himself that he could have made a real difference, but no, had to diddle away my life chasing costume super kooks, instead of seeing the real misery and degradation some folks are forced to live in. Such a waste. Whole damn life was a waste. Had all the power. Should have helped people. Should have set things straight so folks like the Padre could live in peace and dignity. Just hope that the next Wannabeast is a lot smarter than this one was. Fortunately, Juba returns and saves Mike. Before we get to Animal Man, I'd like to talk about the character Mari Macabre, aka Vixen. She's a superhero and fashion model who has the power to copy the abilities of animals. Vixen was originally created for a series to be published in 1978, written by Jerry Conway and Bob Oxner. Her series was cancelled before it was published, but the character was dug up for an Action Comics issue written by Conway. Later, she joined the Detroit-era Justice League. Vixen's backstory was told during Justice League issue number 234. Side note, the cover of this comic shouts, "Vixen! She means to make the bad guys cringe!" And that is just wonderful. Mari's father, Richard Giwe, was an African reverend who led an independence movement in the fictional country of Machanga. Martian Manhunter compares him to Gandhi. Giwe was killed in a military coup launched by his brother, Mustafa Maxwell. Maxwell ruled the country as a dictator until being killed by Vixen in issue 239. And I feel like a member of the Justice League assassinating a foreign leader would probably have massive political implications, and it doesn't. The reason I bring this up is because Machanga's name is inconsistent. In the non-canon cancelled Vixen series, it was called Damula, and in later comics, the country is called Zambezi. The Zambezi, you'll remember, is the tribe Rupert Kimboya came from. In Animal Man, Wannabeast is treated as being the hero of the country of Zambezi. And while we're on the topic, the country of Zambezi is a bit of a mess in terms of geography. In JLA Classified, it's located on the slave coast of Africa, but it contains Mount Kilimanjaro, which is in Tanzania, but it's named after the Zambezi River, which goes primarily through Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique. But Vixen's abilities are inspired by the folklore of the Ashanti people who live primarily in Ghana. It's almost like American writers treat Africa as a single country rather than a massive continent containing more than 1 billion people. The first issue of Grant Morrison's Animal Man begins with Micheal Maxwell returning to the US. Right away, the narration shows that this will be a very different portrayal of the character. Unlike in DC Challenge, Mike cannot stand being in San Diego. To quote, 10 miles outside the city, the screaming begins in earnest. Quiet at first, like a commotion heard in another room. It grows steadily louder with each step. Screaming, the monkeys screaming, rattling the bars, hammering the wire mesh, playing their cages like tuneless instruments, and the smell. God, the stink of the city, huge and sick, coughing up its guts, voiding its bowels into the rivers, into the seas, the smell of people squeezed together like grapes in a press, the sour bouquet of sweat, of all the tiny lives that go untouched in the belly of the monster. He had forgotten just how bad it could be. Gritting his teeth against the pain that pounds on the walls of his skull, the beast wipes the blood from his nose. If only the noise would stop. That terrible noise. Why did we ever come down? Why did we ever come down from the trees? After a scene with Animal Man and his family, we see a dazed Wannabeast walking through the city, drawn by screaming monkeys he alone can hear. Mike rips off the helmet to get a brief relief from the screaming. A man tries to mug him, leading Mike to think about the recent death of Rupert Kimboya. Mike beats the mugger to death and returns to his hunt. Later, he drinks his elixir and breaks into Star Labs. The next day, Star Labs contacts Animal Man about the break-in and show him the lab where they are working on a vaccine for AIDS, something very important in a universe where white supremacist vampires go around giving people HIV. Animal Man claims that AIDS was created by the US government, which is a thing that I'm just gonna brush past. The lab is completely destroyed, and sitting in the middle is a giant, monstrous ball of screaming monkeys, created by Wannabeast. Hey Mike, if you were concerned about animals suffering, maybe you shouldn't have fused all the monkeys into a giant ball that only feels pain. That would have made more sense. The scientist, Dr. Myers, also reports that a lab assistant saw a giant cockroach man, also created by Wannabeast. Up on a rooftop, Wannabeast thinks about how he still hears the screams, because of course he does. He made a giant ball of monkeys that are just constantly in pain! Next, Wannabeast fuses a random homeless man with a rat and sicks the resulting monster on Animal Man. The Rat Man defeats Animal Man, ripping off his arm before defusing. Animal Man fixes this problem by copying the regenerative abilities of an earthworm. The third issue of Animal Man has a horrifying cover, showing a dying ape covered in infectious growths. It opens with the narration stating, "He is coming. The White God is coming." Ah, right. The White God stuff. Now, the religious overtones for Buona Beast began in Swamp Thing Annual number 3, but this is where the White God of Kilimanjaro nickname appears first, which is weird. Like, if you're trying to revamp Buona Beast to make the character less racist, why would you give him a super racist nickname? It's revealed that Juba is in a cage, dying from a painful illness, and that Buona Beast is searching for her. The narration reads, "Her insides hurt. She can no longer recall the way snow felt or the heat of the tropical sun." And shout out to this comic for making me feel sad about the death of Buona Beast's gorilla sidekick. Buona Beast charges through the streets of San Diego, so angry he ignores a bullet to the shoulder. As he arrives at Star Labs, a different Star Labs lab I guess, we see a flashback of Rupert Kimboya's death. Shot in the head, executed during the Civil War. Micheal Maxwell died with Rupert. Now, only the Beast remains. Credit to artist Chaz Truog, by the way, who provided incredible art throughout Morrison's run. Although I liked Rupert as a character, killing him off works as a dramatic moment, better than anything in those 2 issues of Showcase. However, I would like to pause for a moment to discuss when this Civil War took place. At first, I assumed Rupert was killed when Moxai took power, except the timing for that doesn't work. Vixen's father died when she was a child, and she's an adult woman in Animal Man, but Rupert's death is still very recent. So that means that there was a second Civil War, except that means the new government in Showcase is not a newly independent African democracy, but a brutal dictatorship that Mike and Rupert work for. And Buona Beast's "I don't get involved with politics" stance, it's a lot different when he lives under a dictatorship that he refuses to do anything about. Also, the fact that a civil war broke out recently in Zambezi paints a very dark light on Vixen killing Moxai. Turns out, when you kill a dictator, it doesn't fix every problem and, very often, results in a power vacuum that leads to a civil war. Oops. Guess maybe you should have paid attention to what happened in Zambezi after you killed your uncle, Mari. After Rupert's death, Buona Beast returned to Kilimanjaro to find that Juba was gone, taken to the United States. Animal Man returns to Star Labs to find Buona Beast breaking out, carrying Juba with him. Dr. Myers freaks out because Juba is infected with a strain of anthrax created by Star Labs to be used as a weapon. Dr. Myers reveals that Star Lab scientists stationed in Zambezi kidnapped Juba and infected her with anthrax because... honestly, I'm not sure why. Like, she's different from other apes, but wouldn't that mean she'd be more valuable to study, rather than killing her off with a virus you already know is deadly? Myers explains that the super anthrax is highly contagious and could destroy all of California within weeks. Animal Man is rightfully horrified. Buona takes Juba to the San Diego Zoo, where she dies in his arms as he begs God to save her. Animal Man tracks Buona Beast down, and the Beast, in a mood to punch something, attacks him. Animal Man fights against Buona Beast and his chimeras. As the two engage in a psychic stare-down, Buona Beast collapses and begins vomiting blood. Buona says that mankind is digging a grave for the world, and there's no one to stop them, and that we've fallen so far, and there's still no bottom. Animal Man saves Buona Beast by copying his fusion powers, then using them to fuse together the Beast's white blood cells. And I don't know enough about fusion magic to know if that would work in real life. Animal Man leaves Buona Beast in the zoo, unwilling to take him to jail. He goes to Star Labs and punches Dr. Myers in the face. Later, he spends the night thinking over what the Beast said. That night, Buona Beast sneaks into Star Labs again, carrying Juba's corpse. He fuses Myers with the corpse, transforming Myers into a mute, anthrax-riddled ape man who will die chained up, experimented on by other scientists like him. The opening arc of Animal Man is excellent, and in a large part that excellence comes from Buona Beast. His unique powers are used to create creative fights and horrific monsters. Wannabeast is transformed from this laid-back, bland character from Showcase into a serious, dark character. We see as heartbreakingly, Micheal Maxwell loses everything he holds dear. His vow to do more from the end of Swamp Thing continues as he lashes out at the world. He isn't very heroic in the story, but it's hard to hate him as you see his anguish. What's more, Wannabeast inspires Animal Man to try and do more than just punch costume superkooks, a theme that would continue through Grant Morrison's run. He's still kind of racist because of the name and the white god thing, but it's a lot more tolerable when he isn't acting as a white savior and we don't see this stereotypical tribal Africa. Wannabeast is, after Veitch and Morrison reworked him, a good character. And I mean, it's not like he's the only comic character who has some cringeworthy issues in his past. Remember Ben and Reed acting racist when Black Panther was introduced? Remember how, when Wonder Woman first joined the JSA, they made her secretary and didn't let her do anything because she was a woman? Remember that time Carol Danvers got raped and the other Avengers were like, "Wow, that's great! Have fun being kidnapped to another dimension by your rapist, who is also your son, who is also his own father." Remember that time Batman made Robin eat rats, or called Robin the R-word, or the time he murdered a bunch of people and then had sex on top of their charred corpses? All three of those were from the same book, by the way. The point is, the comic industry is defined by new writers continually reinventing and reshaping old characters. It is possible to have a character appear in some very, very bad issues and then become a great character under a different pen. I don't think there's any reason Wannabeast can't be reworked into a better character. Of course, making Wannabeast a better character is kinda hard because of the whole slave master white savior thing. And Morrison solved that problem later in their run. But before we get to that, there's another Animal Man storyline to talk about. In issue 10, Vixen comes to Animal Man's house, asking for help. She reveals that General Moxai was just a puppet working for a greater villain, Hamid Ali, he who never dies. Grant Morrison really likes Showcase 66, apparently. Hamid Ali is excavating some sacred sites, setting free some spirits who attacked Vixen. Those spirits, actually the yellow aliens, show up and teleport Vixen and Animal Man to Zambezi. Some explanation is needed. The yellow aliens are fourth wall breaking reality warpers who gave Animal Man his powers. In Morrison's run, they work with Animal Man to fix a hole in continuity created by Crisis. Also, they work for Grant Morrison, who Animal Man meets. Animal Man is weird in a good way. The comic pans up to a cave inside Kilimanjaro, showing that Wannabeast is missing. Next, it cuts to a giant pit Ali has excavated. A shaman shows up and warns that there is anger in the ghost country. The voices of the dead shake the world. The end of all things is near. And he's right, but that stuff happens in issues that don't feature Wannabeast, so who gives a shit? Hamid Ali detects the superheroes and sends some men to kill them, using everyone's favorite weapon, the crocodile tank! It returns! Also, Ali has a giant excavator that looks like a dick. Hamid Ali captures the heroes and forces them to fight his minion Tabu without their powers. Animal Man wins by copying the duplication ability of Bacteria, even though bacteria aren't animals, an ability so broken that he never uses it again. Animal Man and Vixen escape and travel to the pit, where it's revealed that Hamid Ali has unearthed the yellow alien ship. The shaman warns Hamid Ali that the dead of many worlds who were but never were are calling out to him, asking him to join them. Ali shoots him in the head. On the ship, the yellow aliens explain that they are responsible for creating Vixen's totem, Tabu's masks, and Wannabeast's helmet. Now, this creates a slight continuity contradiction. Traditionally, Vixen's powers came from the trickster god Anansi. The yellow aliens claim Anansi was the disguise they used, except later in Dwayne McDuffie's Justice League of America run, Anansi is revealed to be real when he shows up and kidnaps Vixen and Animal Man. Anansi says that actually the yellow aliens were illusions he created, but Anansi might be lying because, trickster god. Anansi also tries to rewrite reality to make Batman a gun-toting cowboy, the Justice League made of different heroes, and Black Bomber a character who actually exists. He asks Vixen if he can say the N-word. The thing is, the yellow aliens definitely do exist. They show up in 52 to save Animal Man. So, getting back on topic, who created Wannabeast's helmet? Antagon. It was created by Antagon. Anyway, Ali breaks into the ship and shoots one of the yellow aliens in the head. See, that's why Wannabeast is such a tough foe for him. Wannabeast wears a helmet! You can't shoot him in the head, there's metal! The yellow alien is unaffected and calls Hamid Ali an old-fashioned and melodramatic minor character, best forgotten, and erases him from existence. Specifically, the yellow aliens banish him to Limbo, a dimension where characters who don't exist in continuity reside. They banish him to the home of the dead of many worlds who were but never were. Honestly, it's kind of a missed opportunity that Ali doesn't appear again when Animal Man travels through Limbo. Also, that's the second dictator of Zambezi who died within a few months. I feel like that'd probably create some more political instability. Good thing Mike doesn't have any more loved ones to shoot in the head. The cover of the issue immediately after, issue 13, shows Wannabeast clad in shadow, riding a chimera, raising his fist in the air as he charges towards a fleeing Animal Man. This is another line cover. Wannabeast doesn't fight Animal Man in this one. This story, titled Hour of the Beast, begins with newscasters reporting on a clash between South African police and black activists. The newscast repeats the official government stance that it was a minor disturbance where no one was hurt. This is paired with black and white photographs showing brutal police beatings. An archbishop named Mogatuzi, possibly the one who appeared in Swamp Thing, warns that this police violence may erupt into chaos. The newscaster states that the report was compiled under South African government restrictions, as the photographs show the police shooting an unarmed, fleeing man in the back. The photographer, a man named Dominic Mandawe, hides behind a corner as the white police kill 2 more men. Meanwhile, Animal Man runs into Mike Maxwell in an airport. Mike reveals that he has decided to retire from being Wannabeast and is looking for a successor. Animal Man comes along because he wants to see some of the real Africa. Grant Morrison knew what they were doing. Mike and Animal Man head to Tanzania, finally called what it is, to retrieve the helmet and elixir. Mike explains that there have been beasts for centuries, which helps reduce some of the white savior vibes. He also says that there was a Boer war deserter beast before him, which is interesting. As Mike drinks the elixir for the final time, he says he wishes he tried a little harder. Through the elixir, he learns that Dominic is destined to be his successor. Back in South Africa, Dominic sneaks into a whites-only parking garage to deliver the photos to a British journalist. He is caught and beaten by the police. The next day, a violent cop named Vandevort tells him that the British journalist will be stopped at the airport, where the photos Dominic risked his life for will be confiscated. Vandevort says that no one will care if Dominic dies and prepares to hang him. He calls Dominic an ill-educated savage. Dominic suggests that this means Vandevort is a well-educated savage, earning him a chair to the face. Vandevort explains his evil scheme to kill Archbishop Mogatuzi. He plans to murder Dominic, causing a protest, then beat protesters until it turns into a riot. When the bishop attempts to urge peace, they will arrest him for addressing an illegal gathering. A brutal plan that thankfully no police force has ever used in real life. Vandevort tells Dominic a fairy tale about murdering a unicorn by using a virgin as bait, explaining that Dominic is his bait and Dominic's dream of racial equality is a fantasy, like the unicorn. Fortunately, Animal Man shows up and knocks Vandevort out. Mike passes his mantle to Dominic, who says that the white imperialist name has got to go. Mike warns that the beast is beyond politics. Dominic states that, in South Africa, nothing is beyond politics. Dominic explains that, when he was a kid, he participated in the Soweto protests. 20,000 students marched in protest over laws demanding students learn Afrikaans in schools. The police showed up and gunned down 700 children. This is a real event that happened, by the way. Dominic politely asks where Wannabeast was. Where was the African hero when African children were dying? Mike half-heartedly mutters that it isn't about politics. And to be fair, where were the other DC heroes? Where was Superman? Where was Green Lantern? WandaBeast only gets called out because he lives on the same continent, even though he lives 1,700 miles away. The next day, an army of cops attempt to disperse a crowd of peaceful protesters via shooting them. Mike Maxwell walks to the front of the crowd, counting on the fact that, unlike the deaths of black South Africans, Western governments will actually care about a rich white American dying. The cops don't give a shit and shoot him anyway. This is the culmination of Micheal Maxwell's arc that began back in Swamp Thing Annual number 3. His apathy towards politics turned to a regret over not doing more, turned to a willingness to die for what's right. WandaBeast was a racist character, but Morrison turned him into a hero, willing to give his life in the fight against apartheid. Mike survives, and Animal Man takes out the cops by burrowing under them, presumably destroying Cape Town's sewer system in the process. Vandervoort runs off to kill Archbishop Mogatuzzi, but is gored to death by a unicorn created by Dominic. Later, Dominic explains that the man was killed by a rare disease. Symbolism. Dominic tells Animal Man that he isn't WandaBeast, he's Freedom Beast, a fitting name for the new themes of his character. As for Mike, he decides to stay behind in South Africa and help Freedom Beast. The issue ends with Dominic's photos arriving at the Daily Planet, delivered by Animal Man. Grant Morrison fixed WandaBeast. They made WandaBeast into a complex, well-written character, while also shaving away a lot of the character's more racist elements. And what's more, Morrison created Freedom Beast, an excellent character who I am sure other writers will treat with respect. Micheal Maxwell's role in the DC universe isn't over yet. He reappeared in Animal Man issue 20, where he and Dominic attended the funeral for Animal Man's murdered family. Micheal Maxwell later played a major role in the climax of Tom Veitch and Steve Dillon's run. And I will talk about that later, but first, I feel like watching some cartoons.
Jumbo Bwana.
WandaBeast is best known not for his occasional appearances in the comics, but for being a character that DC cartoon producers weirdly like a lot. A lot more people have seen that one episode of Teen Titans Go than have read the opening arc of Grant Morrison's Animal Man. But it actually took a long time for WandaBeast to appear on television. Wanda was planned to appear on the 1967 Aquaman cartoon, but the episode was scrapped, leaving the character out of adaptations for another 30 years. Wanda's first appearance outside the comics was on the show Justice League Unlimited, most prominently as a guest character in the episode This Little Piggy. In this episode, the sorceress Circe transforms Wonder Woman into a pig, forcing Batman and Zatanna to work to turn her back to normal. After Wonder Pig sneaks out the door while Batman isn't looking and disappears into the streets of Gotham, Batman calls in WandaBeast to go find her. Wanda does, but immediately loses her in an industrial slaughterhouse. You know, one of those massive slaughterhouses they have in downtown metropolitan areas where they tie pigs up and throw them on a conveyor belt that leads to giant, scary murder machines. Those exist, right? And WandaBeast disappears from the episode after Wonder Pig goes into the slaughterhouse. She gets saved at the last minute by Batman making a deal with Circe, but if Batman had been a minute slower, Wonder Woman would be dead, because WandaBeast just wandered off. Two more things about WandaBeast in this episode. First off, he is kinda lecherous towards Zatanna, staring at her legs and growling at her even though she's clearly uncomfortable. Second, he has a really thick Brooklyn accent in this episode, which he doesn't in the comics. Actually, that's a good segue into talking about how WandaBeast, talks. In Showcase, he talks with the sorta stilted, mostly expository voice a lot of Silver Age DC heroes had. In Brave and the Bold, he's this cheery yet deep-voiced everyman. In Swamp Thing, he has a vague Texan accent. In Animal Man, he has these brooding, poetic inner monologues. This Little Piggy is the only speaking role WandaBeast has in Unlimited, although he can be seen in crowd shots in Initiation and Divided We Fall. He can be seen tackling a black Vulcan clone and punching one of the Wonder Twins in Panic in the Sky, and finally he is seen chasing after the Legion of Doom with the rest of the Justice League and Destroyer. He's actually the first down the stairs, leading the charge. At first I thought this was cool, but then I realized it's because he doesn't have any friends. The Detroit team is together, the International team is together, the Justice Society is together, Shining Knight and Vigilante are together, and of course the last thing we see is the Trinity together, but Wannabeast has no one. He has two friends in the comics, both of whom were killed off by Morrison. He's kind of friends with Animal Man in the comics, except they fight in most of their appearances together. The only version of the DC universe where anyone really gives a shit about Wannabeast is in Batman the Brave and the Bold. Now, did I have to rewatch the entire Cadmus arc to get those screenshots? No. Do I regret it? Hell no. Wannabeast was slated to have lines in the cut episode Misfortune Cookies, written by J.M. DeMatteis. The episode was scripted, but never animated. In this episode, Martian Manhunter would have been tasked with acting as the mediator during a peace conference between two warring alien races. However, due to him eating Oreos, which are a mind-altering drug for Martians apparently, Elongated Man would have been forced to mediate in his place. The episode would have started with Wannabeast, Elongated Man, Flash, and Booster Gold being assembled by Martian Manhunter, so he can kick them off the watchtower during the meeting to prevent them from embarrassing the League. And that is bullshit! Flash has more than proven himself to the League at this point, and Elongated Man is the one who saves the day in the end. Completely valid regarding Wannabeast and Booster Gold, though. At the end of the episode, Martian Manhunter was to say that he was embarrassed of himself for acting like a buffoon, to which Green Lantern would reply, "That happens every day around here, or haven't you met Wannabeast?" Wannabeast appears a few times in the Justice League Unlimited spin-off comics. He can be seen in the cafeteria in issue 20 and tying up Titano in issue 33. His only major appearance is in issue 29, written by Adam Beechin and titled Untamed. This issue is narrated by Animal Man, who hates the fact that he's always paired up with Wannabeast. Wannabeast acts like a caveman in this one, shouting, "I am the king!" and pounding on his chest like a gorilla. Throughout the issue, Wannabeast acts like a stubborn, selfish asshole, much to Superman and Animal Man's chagrin. Animal Man is tasked with making Wannabeast a team player. Wannabeast responds by smashing random shit. The duo are sent to fight a villain who controls bees. Wannabeast, in his only cool moment in this continuity, shrugs off hundreds of bee stings to save Animal Man, although it's questionable if he was motivated by a desire to help a teammate, or if he did it because he likes smashing shit. I'm gonna be honest, the DCAU version of Wannabeast sucks. Like, if I had a tier list, he would be at the bottom. Actually, let me make a tier list real quick. There! Showcase is a boring white savior, so I guess he's technically worse, but this version is an unbearable asshole. Unlike the definitive version of Wannabeast, who appeared in Batman, the Brave and the Bold. Batman, the Brave and the Bold was a cartoon developed by James Tucker and Michael Jelenic, based off the comic that Bob Haney and Mike Sekowsky worked on way back when. Each episode had Batman team up with a different superhero. The show notably featured a ton of obscure Silver Age characters, like OMAC and Uncle Sam. What better place for Wannabeast to appear than on this show? Wannabeast, played by Kevin Michael Richardson, appears in multiple episodes and was important enough to be featured in the show's opening animation. Wanna first appears in the show's 6th episode, Enter the Outsiders, or more accurately, in the cold open. Every episode of Batman the Brave and the Bold had a short intro story, then a main story after the title sequence, kinda like this video essay. In this episode's cold open, Wannabeast teams up with Batman to defeat the Aquaman villain Black Manta. Wannabeast introduces himself to the audience by fusing a horse and a spider, something so shocking it knocks out a nearby cop quicker than the thought of fentanyl. Wannabeast tries to defeat Black Manta by running ahead of him and creating a giant web to ensnare his mecha, but Manta fires missiles at him and breaks the web. Wanna next creates a flying pelican shark and crashes it through Manta's windshield, saving the day. Batman says Wannabeast's powers are useful, while mentally noting that they are incredibly gross. And shut up, Batman! Fusion powers are cool! Wannabeast has cameos in The Mayhem of the Music Meister and in the tie-in comic Night of the Batman. He appears on the cover of the first tie-in comic, despite never appearing in the issue. His Earth 3 equivalent can be seen in the episode Deep Cover for Batman. Wannabeast's first starring role is in episode 12 of season 2. Gorillas in Our Midst, directed by Michael Goguen and written by Todd Casey. The episode begins with Batman traveling through a jungle with Detective Chimp, a hyper-intelligent chimp who is a detective because DC really likes hyper-intelligent apes. Also, he's a card-carrying member of the Republican Party. That is not a joke. Anyway, Batman and Detective Chimp team up after Gorilla Grodd kidnaps all the world's apes to create an army. Batman says that he left Wannabeast in charge of Gotham after he left. And why? I mean, Buana is competent, Batman even says so, but there are 50 different superheroes who live in Gotham. Batman doesn't assign heroes to watch Gotham in other episodes of this show. While they're talking about this, Detective Chimp says he wants to have sex with Wannabeast's girlfriend, Vixen. First off, ew. Second, why am I constantly forced to discuss DC characters having sex with apes? And third, I just realized that Wannabeast and Vixen never interact in the comics. Their powers are from the same source, they both team up with Animal Man frequently, but no, they have never met in the comics. The closest we have is Vixen working to stop Shining Man in the Antagon arc of Animal Man, more on that later, but even then, she never meets Micheal Maxwell in person. And in Morrison's run, the comic has an issue where Vixen fights Wannabeast's archenemy, then the next issue is about Wannabeast retiring, with the duo just barely missing meeting each other. Anyway, there are a couple in this show. They show up to stop a jewelry store robbery by Killer Moth. Wannabeast is disappointed that he isn't actually a moth-human hybrid. And I mean, you can just make him a moth-human hybrid, my guy. Also, he suggests Vixen use cockroach powers for durability, fitting his eccentric personality. Vixen knocks out Killer Moth, while Wannabeast takes out Killer Moth's minions by creating a cat horse. Vixen actually likes the cat horse. Honestly, Wannabeast and Vixen are couple goals in this episode. Batman watches as Gorilla Grodd, Gorilla Boss, and Mallow team up to take over the world. Back in Gotham, Buana asks a pigeon for dating advice. Vixen comes by to have a serious talk about their relationship. She's cut off when a swarm of fly-rat fusions flies past, created by Wannabeast in order to patrol the city. Vixen says he's scaring people, but Buana insists that Gotham is filled with flies and rats, so the people should be used to them. The gorillas show up in a plane. Vixen flies up to face them, and Mallow shoots a net at her, knocking her out of the sky. Wannabeast saves her while flying on a dragon created out of a snake and a pigeon. The gorillas land and one charges for Wannabeast. He attempts to fuse the gorilla with an inchworm to incapacitate it, but instead creates a giant monster ape who wraps around him. Grodd knocks Vixen out and calls Wannabeast pathetic. The two of them are imprisoned in a zoo. And those bars are pretty far apart, Vixen should easily be able to slip out. Wannabeast blames himself and feels bad about failing Batman and Vixen. He tells Vixen she could do a lot better than a D-lister like him. Batman and Detective Chimp are captured and thrown in the same cell. Detective Chimp hits on Vixen, even though she's clearly uncomfortable, because he's the worst. They escape after Wannabeast fuses Detective Chimp with a bee. Wait, why does the hat shrink down with him? Once free, Wannabeast apologizes to Batman. Batman says he believes in Buana. His belief is justified as Buana saves the day by fusing Batman with a lion, lizard, and eagle to make Bat Griffin, I guess? Earlier in the episode, it was stated that Buana couldn't fuse humans, but him doing so when the chips are down implies that he has a mental block, and that Wannabeast is far stronger than people give him credit. At the end of the episode, Vixen and Buana resume their serious relationship talk. And Vixen proposes! Again! Couple goals! I think Wannabeast works better in Batman the Brave and the Bold than in any other story. He's great in Grant Morrison's Animal Man run, but only works as a character in those two specific stories that are designed to tear the character down. Afterwards, there weren't many stories to tell with the character. Wannabeast, as he appears in this show, is an eccentric goofball. And he should be! Wannabeast is a very goofy character. In this show, he's weird, but he's also kind and heroic. He has doubts, he isn't respected, but at the end of the day, he has the makings of a real hero. Also, he isn't racist. The name is still a bit iffy, but it can't be overstated how much moving Wannabeast away from the white savior story makes the character better. Grant Morrison gave depth to Wannabeast. but they aren't why I love the character. I like Wannabeast enough to make a 2-hour video essay about him because I loved this show as a kid, especially Bwana's role in the Siege of Starro, a two-parter making up episodes 13 and 14 of Season 2. But, before we watch that episode, there's some groundwork we need to do. Starro the Conqueror is an alien monster created by Gardner Fox and Wannabe's co-creator, Mike Sekowsky. It's an alien starfish with mind control powers who was the first villain the Justice League faced. A cartoon version of Starro can be seen on a poster in the show's first episode, fighting Guy Gardner and Batman, but this doesn't make sense in continuity, and also Starro looks different than the rest of the show, so I'm gonna assume it's just an Easter egg. You know how I said Brave and the Bold feature cold opens showing off different heroes? Well, these cold opens were used to build up Starro and its minion, the Faceless Hunter. The first happens in the episode Revenge of the Reach. In this cold open, Batman teams up with the Challengers of the Unknown to investigate a radioactive meteorite. After Batman leaves, Starros break out of the meteor and attach to the faces of the Challengers. The cold open ends ominously, with their fates unresolved. During the cold open for Clash of the Metal Men, Aquaman returns home to find his family Starroed. As he leaves his home, he sees all of Atlantis is Starroed. The mysterious Faceless Hunter shows up, explaining Starro is an alien conqueror and that he is its herald. Aquaman attempts to fight the Hunter, but is defeated when his family and people serve as human shields. Aquaman, like the challengers before him, falls under Starro's control. The third and final prologue comes in the episode The Power of Shazam. The episode begins with the Faceless Hunter narrating that he was tasked with defeating Earth's heroes so Starro could take over a montage of him defeating Blue Beetle, Green Arrow and Speedy, Jay Garrick, and Plastic Man. He also flat out kills Red Tornado because he's immune to mind control. And I mean, he's a robot who can be rebuilt, but this is the last time Red Tornado appears, excluding Mightfall. The cold open ends by showing an army of Earth's heroes, all under Starro's control. The Siege of Starro was written by Joseph Kerr. Part 1 was directed by Ben Jones, while Part 2 was directed by Michael Goguen. It begins with Wannabe's narrating that there has always been villains, but heroes have always rose to stand against them and protect the innocent, as images of DC's history of superheroes play. Wanna asks, what makes a hero? Courage, powers? And says that this question would be asked as Earth faced its greatest threat. The episode cuts to Starroed Green Lanterns fighting against Kilowog and Guy Gardner, before the massive, planet-sized main Starro appears and defeats them. Back on Earth, the Faceless Hunter attacks Batman in the Batcave. Batman is almost defeated, but is saved by Booster Gold. The Faceless Hunter retreats and the invasion begins, with Earth's superheroes acting as Starro's foot soldiers. Only Batman, Wannabeast, Firestorm, Captain Marvel, and Booster Gold escape Starro's clutches. Side note, Captain Marvel actually thinks Wana's powers are cool, making him the only reasonable person in the show. The 5, or 7 depending on how you count it, survivors are forced to fight an army of Starro-controlled heroes. Wannabeast easily defeats Fire, Plastic Man, and, that guy. Ultra the Multi-Alien, I think. Goddamn, that is an obscure character. Wannabeast comes face to star-covered face with Vixen. He is unable to hurt her. Fortunately, she stupidly knocks herself out. The Faceless Hunter watches Wannabeast fight and is impressed. Overwhelmed, the heroes retreat, with Wanna carrying Vixen. She wakes up and announces the arrival of the true Starro, a stadium-sized starfish who plans to drain the life force of Earth's inhabitants. As an aside, Starro is voiced by Wanna's VA, Kevin Michael Richardson, in the first part of the Siege, but voiced by Batman's VA, Diedrich Baker, in Part 2. I'm tempted to treat this as symbolism, but it's probably just reusing voice actors. Baker also voiced Kilowog and Solomon Grundy, while Richardson voiced a whole host of characters including Black Manta, Detective Chimp, and Lex Luthor. I'm not sure why they changed the voice between episodes, though. The Faceless Hunter shows up and fights Bwana and Batman, while the others go to defeat Starro. The Hunter explains that Starro is a planet-destroying conqueror, and that he made a deal with the monster when it came to his planet that resulted in him becoming its herald. This implies he's someone like the Silver Surfer, who made a deal to save his people. He did not. Bwana asks the Faceless Hunter to betray Starro and help them save the world, but the Hunter refuses. The Hunter says Bwana Beast interests him. Bwana assumes he thinks he's a joke, but no, the Hunter is genuinely impressed. Captain Marvel kills Starro, but the Faceless Hunter captures Bwana Beast, calling him a new weapon to spread death and destruction. Part 2's cold open shows Bwana Beast's backstory. Micheal Maxwell was a pro wrestler in Africa who fought Juba for the helmet, which seems to just be a helmet in this continuity. Mike got his ass handed to him, then was exposed to toxic waste that gave him his fusion powers. This allowed him to win the rematch and thus the helmet. As the flashback plays, Bwana Beast narrates about heroes. To quote, "Why is it that, for so many heroes, a lifetime fighting injustice was born from some tragic loss? Perhaps because, for most, the natural reaction to loss is to wallow in one's pain, to let it eat you up, not for those destined for heroic greatness. Instead, tragedy becomes an opportunity to stand up, take stock, and discover what they're really made of. For them, it can be transformative, energizing, and with growth comes wisdom, so a hero can bounce back stronger than before. A champion, uncaged, never again to be prisoner to his demons." The Faceless Hunter takes Bwana back to his ship and promises to bring out his full power. He tortures Bwana Beast, draining his fusion abilities. Bwana says that Starro is dead and that the Hunter doesn't have to fear it anymore. The Faceless Hunter explains his full backstory. He was a violent warrior on a planet of pacifists. He made a deal with Starro. He would become the Conqueror's herald. In return, Starro destroyed the Hunter's pacifist home. Bwana breaks free and puts up a good fight, but the Hunter defeats him. Using Bwana's powers, the Faceless Hunter fuses all of the Starros into a giant monster that defeats Earth's heroes and causes city-wrecking earthquakes. The Metal Men hold off the monster as Batman goes to rescue Bwana Beast. Batman defeats the Hunter, but the Starro Kaiju tears the Metal Men apart. Bwana, already severely injured, is forced to push himself to his limit to defuse the monster, saying, "He can't give up. There are too many depending on me." Batman says he's tearing himself apart, but he keeps going until Starro is completely destroyed. He tells Batman to tell Vixen he loves her, as he pushes his powers farther than he ever has before. Bwana Beast dies, torn apart by his own power, vaporized until only energy remains. The end of the episode is bittersweet. Vixen waits for Bwana and cries as Batman returns alone. Earth's heroes attend a funeral to honor their fallen comrade, commemorated by a statue, in a surprisingly sad scene for such a light-hearted series. The episode ends with more narration from Bwana. He says, "So, being a hero isn't all it's cracked up to be. But you know what? I'd do it all over again, in a hummingbird's heartbeat." The Brave and the Bold gives us something no other Bwana Beast story does. A story where he's a genuine hero. Bwana's death is tear-jerking because throughout the show he's been a kind, brave, selfless hero. For one brief moment, Bwana is Earth's greatest hero. There is one more Brave and the Bold episode to talk about. Mightfall. In this episode, all-powerful, fourth-wall-breaking imp Bat-Mite decides to get Batman the Brave and the Bold cancelled by giving Batman a neon-talking Super Street Batluge and replacing Aquaman's voice actor John DiMaggio with Ted McGinley from Happy Days. Because that's a reference the kids will get. Bat-Mite's scheme works, causing the show to end and the universe to begin falling apart. The final scene shows the series' massive cast at a rap party. And who's that talking to Vixen? Bwana Beast. It's nice that the show ends with him happy, if only for a brief moment. Anyway, moving from a wacky cartoon I liked as a kid and have nostalgia for, to a wacky cartoon that I hate because it's the worst show ever, not because it's a children's show and I'm a grown-ass man who doesn't have nostalgia for it. We have Teen Titans Go. Bwana Beast appears in the episode You're Fired as a possible replacement for Beast Boy. He fuses Silky with a rabbit, which disgusts the team. He isn't hired, which is good, because he's a grown man trying to join a team called the Teen Titans. Why you doing that, Bwana? He also has cameo appearances in Justice League's Next Top Talent Idol star, manner and mannerisms, as a toy in Collect Them All, and in the movie Teen Titans Go to the Movies. He also appears in the Teen Titans Go mobile game. His in-game description says he's banned from most zoos, not only because he fuses the animals, but because he violates the dress code. Full disclosure, I took these screenshots from a YouTube video because I refused to pay $4 for a Teen Titans Go gacha mobile game. I don't have much dignity, but I have some.
Also, he appears in an issue of the Teen Titans Go tie-in comic. The wiki didn't list that as an appearance, almost causing me to miss it, which is bad because I'm trying to mention literally every single appearance of this character.
Wannabeast doesn't appear in Young Justice, but Juba appears in the 19th issue of the tie-in comic, working for Solivar, yet another hyper-intelligent DC Comics gorilla. They fight Grodd and Maul, who, and this is such a creative new idea that I need to explain it very carefully, who team up and raise an army of DC's hyper-intelligent gorillas to take over the world. Juba doesn't do anything in this comic, and I could not find a panel where their head isn't half cut off. Wannabeast made his live-action debut in the Legends of Tomorrow episode Freak Show. Kinda. He's a strong man with a bag costume who was one-shotted by Vixen. I'd say this appearance was bad, but it's a CW show. The badness is implied. Wannabeast appears as a summonable hero in Scribblenauts Unmasked, as does Freedom Beast. But not Juba, or Rupert, or Vandevort, or Hamid Ali. I call foul, Scribblenauts! You advertise this game as featuring every single DC character, and there's a ton it doesn't feature. Also, there were a few toys made of Wannabeast over the years, shown on screen now. And that's it. That's all of his appearances outside of the comics. But Wannabeast does have some great, he has some appearances in the comics I haven't touched on yet.
Jumbo Bwana.
Micheal Maxwell reappears during the Antagon arc that made up the final issues of Tom Veitch's Animal Man run. In this arc, the Yellow Aliens are retconned as having been a false memory created by the monster Antagon. Antagon is a very interesting concept. It is the antithesis of life. Animal Man, Vixen, and Wannabeast all draw upon the same source of power, later reimagined as the Red. Antagon is the shadow of the Red, a living darkness that hates life and wants to see it destroyed. 10 million years ago, Antagon was sealed away by warriors called the Animal Masters in a cocoon. But during this arc, Antagon begins to break free, forcing a shaman named Stone to assemble Earth's animal heroes to defeat it. Mike appears in issue 47, titled The Shining Man. The story begins with his internal narration saying he didn't need the helmet or the elixir, something he realized after giving them away. His powers were always born from the Red, and thus, from Antagon. Micheal Maxwell is noticeably disheveled, unshaven with white hair. He sits almost naked by a campfire, eating the leg of one of Buck Sampson's cyborg zombie minions. Long story I don't have time to go into. Mike's narration explains that Antagon reached out to him, giving him power and destroying the man he once was. Subtextually, I feel the reason Micheal Maxwell, rather than Vixen or Animal Man, was chosen to be Antagon's emissary is because he was already broken down. The deaths of Rupert and Juba destroyed him emotionally, making him vulnerable to the whispers of a dark god. Mike walks into Antagon's cocoon, passing by Animal Man's daughter Maxine, who is also drawn in by Antagon. When Animal Man goes into the cocoon to rescue Maxine, he is attacked by Mike. Animal Man tries to choke Mike to death, his rage exposing him to Antagon's influence. Mike leads Animal Man to the center of the cocoon and clutches it, praying to his new Dark Lord. Antagon breaks free of its bindings, possessing Mike Maxwell and transforming him into the monstrous supervillain, the Shining Man. Shining Man tears through the countryside, slaughtering everything in sight. I am sent forth from the unitary Aeon to bring judgment upon all that dares to live, he monologues. I am the self-begotten, the source of incomprehensible undoing. You who sleep, you who dream, wake up! Return to the nothingness from which you sprang. Shining Man proclaims he will destroy the universe in 7 days, getting downright biblical. Meanwhile, evil scientist Buck Sampson duplicates Animal Man's powers so he can become the superhero Meta Man. He immediately falls under Antagon's influence. An unnamed scriptwriter chases Shining Man, narrating as Antagon slaughters tens of thousands. Imagination can be a disease, the unleashing of murderous intent. Imagination can be born of cynicism and hatred, the absolute denial of redeeming possibility. This entity, the Antagon, was one of that kind. It served no purpose other than to curse, scorn, and annihilate. The Antagon was more than physical doom. It was the obliteration of the mind. I know this video is about wannabes, but can I stop for a moment to talk about how much I love Antagon as a villain? Grant Morrison's run dealt with the nature of reality for a fictional character, earning it rightful praise. The Veitch and Dillon run, while a bit more hit and miss, does expand on those themes. In this finale, storytelling is explicitly tied to the very concept of life. Antagon is the antithesis of life, but it's more than that. It's despair manifested. It's the death of hope. It's hatred and cruelty and pride. It's grief and terror and pain. It's cynicism manifested. Meta Man kills Shining Man, but that doesn't kill Antagon. How could it? Buck Sampson is a cruel, violent bastard. He isn't the antidote to cynicism. Antagon possesses him, growing even stronger. Animal Man defeats Antagon, using his connection to the power of creation to create an entire new universe and seal the monster away in it. The monster is defeated through imagination, through creativity, through hope. It's fitting that Animal Man is the one to defeat Antagon. What else can defeat the living embodiment of suffering but an ordinary man who loves his family very, very much? Antagon does not die. It cannot be destroyed because it is destruction. But the screenwriter isn't worried. He has endless faith in the healing power of imagination. What a wonderful story. Also, I kinda glossed over it, but Mike Maxwell died back there. To be honest, as a guy who has slowly become a diehard Wannabes fan over the course of making this video, this isn't a great Wannabes story. Antagon is great, but Mike Maxwell feels detached from his previous character arc. Now, there were a few other appearances of Mike Maxwell in DC Comics over the years. He appears when Mr. Mickelspittlick and Batmite travel to Crisis on Infinite Earths in Superman and Batman World's Funniest. He appears in the Plastic Man special one-shot in a parody of Crisis that is later revealed to be a dream. He appears in Blackest Night when Green Lantern shows the Flash a construct of all the heroes who died following the crisis. An alternate universe version of Buona Beast appears in JLA The Nail, imprisoned with Congorilla, Man-Bat, Dolphin, and Animal Man in a metahuman research facility. He later appears as part of the crowd of heroes after being freed by the Atom. An evil vampire version of Buona Beast appears in DC vs. Vampires. He is killed by Green Arrow. On the other hand, the Flashpoint version of Green Arrow is mentioned to have been mauled to death by Freedom Beast in Flashpoint Beyond #1. DC Wiki says that the Flashpoint version of Freedom Beast is Alec Holland, who is Swamp Thing in the main universe. I don't know where that is said. The wiki also says that this mention in Flashpoint Beyond #1 is the first mention of Flashpoint Freedom Beast, so I don't know. A version of one of the beasts can later be seen on a computer screen in issue 6, riding a chimera in Tanzania. The main universe Buona Beast appears in the 2009 DC Comics Holiday Special, which came out in February of 2010 for some reason, in a story by Bo Smith, titled The Hunt for Christmas. This story shows Buona Beast in generic Africa, fighting some thieves as a priest narrates a sermon. The comic shows Buona Beast with long hair, which I don't think is a good look for him. At the end, it's revealed he's saving presents stolen from a Christian mission, leading to a cheery panel showing Buona Beast wearing a Santa hat. The priest talks about God moving in mysterious ways, and I guess he means via kinda racist superheroes with weird animal powers. And by God, I mean ancient tribal gods, or yellow aliens, or Anansi, or Antagon. Wait a minute. Micheal Maxwell died in 1992 and stopped being Buona Beast in 1989. Why is he Buona Beast in this comic? I mean, it might be a period piece. The comic also features a Sergeant Rock story and an Enemy Ace story set during the Second and First World Wars respectively, But still, it's kind of weird to have a bunch of contemporary Christmas, or Hanukkah in Ragman's case, adventures, and then have one that takes place, I don't know, 5 years ago in universe. The timeline in the DC universe is a bit messy. Regardless, this is Buona Beast's final appearance before the 2011 DC Comics relaunch. But there's another beast to talk about. Freedom Beast appears in issue 31 of Animal Man, attending Animal Man's funeral. Although, if we're being technical, this is the alternate universe version of Freedom Beast from Earth 27, because that whole arc took place in an alternate universe, even though alternate universes didn't exist in DC Comics at the time. Freedom Beast is one of only 2 superheroes who attends, and he looks really out of place in full costume. In the first issue of Tom Veitch's run, Stone smashes a figurine of Freedom Beast, along with figures of Grant Morrison and the Yellow Aliens. And I don't really get why. Like, this run retcons Morrison and the Yellow Aliens as illusions created by Antagon, and Stone smashing them can be seen as part of his war against the monster. But why smash Freedom Beast? In fact, why didn't he recruit Freedom Beast as one of the Animal Masters? He tried to recruit Micheal Maxwell, who was retired, and we all saw how that ended up! Freedom Beast then disappeared for 10 years. His next appearance was in 1999's Day of Judgment event, fighting demons in South Africa alongside Animal Man. In 2005, he appeared as part of the army of heroes fighting the Omacs in issue 6 of the OMAC Project. During Day of Vengeance, not to be confused with Day of Judgment, he can be seen in a bar for magic superheroes. Or, I guess, half of him can. Freedom Beast and the others are hiding from the Spectre, who has gone evil and started killing other superheroes. This story continues in Infinite Crisis, and it took me 5 attempts at reading this issue to find him. It's like Where's Waldo, if he only appeared in 1 out of every 30 pages. There he is. He appears with other magic heroes at Stonehenge, working to summon the Spectre. They succeed, and the Spectre kills one of them. I only read the relevant Infinite Crisis issue, so I'm not quite sure why they thought summoning the guy who blew up Atlantis a week ago was a good idea. In the continuation of the story in Infinite Crisis Day of Vengeance, not to be confused with Day of Judgment, Infinite Crisis, or Day of Vengeance, Freedom Beast helps fight the 7 deadly sins in Gotham after the Spectre sets them free. He is possessed by Wrath and defeated off-screen by Ragman. After the Spectre was defeated, Freedom Beast joined the Global Guardians, an international superhero team. And that's a great idea! Putting him on a team means more appearances. Plus, we can see Freedom Beast develop strong relationships with other characters. That'll happen! Right? Freedom Beast and the Global Guardians have an off-screen fight with Black Adam during World War III. The story in which Black Adam kills millions of civilians because he said his wife is dead. Can't wait to see the movie where Dwayne Johnson commits mass genocide. Freedom Beast and the Global Guardians appear again in a Green Lantern arc running from issue 10 till issue 7 of Jeff Johns' run. The arc begins with Hal Jordan fighting an alien assassin in Russian airspace. Russian superhero team, the Rocket Reds, show up to arrest him. He fights them with a hammer and a sickle because apparently he forgot that the Soviet Union collapsed in the 90s. Anyway, this airspace violation breaks international law prohibiting metahumans from going wherever they want, so the Global Guardians are sent by the UN to fight Green Lantern. In Paris, Freedom Beast recruits Crimson Fox to the Global Guardians. After Green Lantern goes to Russia again, the Global Guardians show up to arrest him. Because GL accidentally kills a bunch of POWs, long story, they add war crimes to his rap sheet. The Guardians charge at Green Lantern and Freedom Beast kicks him, shouting, "He doesn't deserve the honor of being a Green Lantern!" GL's narration reveals that Animal Man recommended Freedom Beast replace him when he left the Justice League, something which would have been really cool. Why didn't they do that? The Faceless Hunters show up and it's revealed the Global Guardians have been mind-controlled into acting like assholes by them. By the way, the Faceless Hunters are an entire race in the comics, and to be honest, I think the Brave and the Bold version is cooler. The Rocket Reds show up, the Justice League shows up, and Freedom Beast continues not doing anything noteworthy. This is his appearance in issue 17. Can you see him? There he is! The wiki says he appears in issue 16, but I could not find him. The Global Guardians, and thus Freedom Beast, appeared in a few issues of Checkmate. Freedom Beast can briefly be seen fighting against Cobra cultists alongside the rest of the Guardians in issue 24. The Global Guardians again team up with Checkmate in issues 29, 30, and 31. Issue 29 begins with the Global Guardians fighting a big lion, scorpion, chimera thing. Checkmate sends in Chimera, one of their agents who has shape-shifting powers. Chimera refuses to fight as part of the team, and instead just beats up the other Chimera by turning giant and breathing fire. Once again, Freedom Beast does jack shit. Side note, it would be interesting if, in addition to being able to fuse animals, Freedom Beast could defuse them, kind of like Vegeta's spirit fission technique. That would be very useful during this story and fits with his powers. To be fair, I would settle for him fusing literally anything, because I don't think he's ever done that since killing Vandivort with symbolism. Like, oh no, there's a big Chimera monster! If only there was a character who could create another Chimera monster to fight it! Now that I think about it, the quality of a Bwana/Freedom Beast story correlates closely with how much their powers are used. Grant Morrison used Bwanas for excellent horror and Freedoms for a poetic defeat of a vile villain. Raven the Bold had Bwana Beast use his powers constantly, in creative ways, culminating in a story where a villain wants to use his powers for monstrous means. But Freedom Beast never gets to use his powers while he's with the Global Guardians. It's part of why he feels like just a generic extra body for the team. In the next couple issues, the Global Guardians are sent to fight a giant monster named Ki-Yu. On the plus side, Freedom Beast has a personality for once in this story. Unfortunately, it isn't the soft-spoken, intelligent personality he had from Animal Man. He dismisses the monster of the week as something out of a bad Japanese horror flick and charges in, against the team's better judgment, to save a hostage whom he calls Sweet Cheeks. He gets flicked away by the monster's tail, punched in the face by a mook, thanks Chimera for saving the day, and doesn't do anything with the Global Guardians ever again. Next, Freedom Beast briefly appears in Final Crisis, fighting off Darkseid's forces as they assault Gorilla City. To be honest, Freedom Beast is a bit of a wasted character after Animal Man number 13. There are only 2 more appearances of him before the 2011 reboot, and neither of them are very good. Superman 689 is a montage of Mon-El fighting crime across the globe. He stops by Africa and helps Freedom Beast and Kongorilla fight poachers. Okay, this comic came out in 2008. Can we please move past the vague, poorly defined Africa? It doesn't even say a country, just Africa. And, by coincidence, the 2 superheroes who live in Africa are together. The thing is, Freedom Beast is from South Africa, and Kongorilla lives in, as his name implies, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. 2 countries that are separated by thousands of miles. There's a bigger distance between Cape Town and Kinshasa than there is between Moscow and London. Africa is, and I cannot stress this enough, a continent. Also, why is Freedom Beast fighting poachers? That was Bwana's shtick. Freedom Beast fights racist cops in densely populated cities, not random poachers. DC is regressing! They published one good portrayal of an African superhero in 1989, and 19 years later, they've gone back to doing the same shit they were doing in the 60s. I'd also like to note that this is the first time Kongorilla and Freedom Beast have been seen together. One of only 2 times they will ever be seen together, the other being in Cry for Justice. Let's talk about how Dominic Mandawe, the super troubleshooter Freedom Beast, died. In the miniseries Cry for Justice, written by James Robinson, the supervillain Prometheus decides to get revenge on the Justice League because Batman and Martian Manhunter brainwashed him into being eternally tortured while comatose, something incredibly out of character for both of them. This is a story where Ray Palmer shrinks down and tortures a man by walking on his brain, the same thing that killed Sue Dibney. This is a story where Roy Harper loses an arm, and then because that wasn't edgy enough, his daughter dies horribly. This is a comic written by an edgelord where characters act out of character and die randomly. It isn't a very good comic, is what I'm saying. Anyway, Prometheus's incredibly overcomplicated plan involves having supervillains kill the loved ones of various superheroes. Issue 1 cuts to the Congo, where Kongorilla is sitting in front of a massive pile of dead gorillas. His entire clan has been slaughtered, and his human body is dead. And if I was a Congarilla fan, I would find this shocking and disturbing, probably. As Congarilla is mourning the death of what is essentially his family and the loss of his humanity, an injured Dominic Mundawe wanders out of the wilderness. Or, excuse me, Dominic Manawe. They misspelled his name! Freedom Beast tells Congarilla that he tried to stop them, tried to be the hero you taught me to be, before dying. Okay, this is bullshit! James Robinson wrote a story in which Freedom Beast dies to make a character who was already sad feel sad squared, I guess. A character who, again, had appeared with Freedom Beast exactly once in a story written by, hold on, let me check, James Robinson! These characters did not have a relationship before Robinson showed up. He barely did anything to show them as friends, and then he fridged Freedom Beast to make Congarilla sad. And he couldn't even be bothered to spell his fucking name right. Also, what the fuck does Freedom Beast mean by, I tried to be the hero you taught me to be? Dominic Mundawe was always a hero. He was a journalist who was willing to die to expose the crimes of a brutal government. He was chosen by the Helmet because he was already a hero. He'd been an active superhero for 20 goddamn years by the time he met Congarilla. Congarilla isn't his mentor. If anyone was his mentor, it was Micheal Maxwell, and even then only barely. We don't even get to see how he dies. He's bleeding from the abdomen, but how did he get that wound? A few issues later, it's mentioned Prometheus killed him personally, but that was off-screen. Freedom Beast is killed by Prometheus, a villain he never met, because Prometheus wants to fuck with Congarilla, who is just a casual acquaintance because Prometheus is mad at Batman and Martian Manhunter. Also, Prometheus killed off Starman's boyfriend because it was 2009 and burying the gays was all the rage. At least Leon Harper's death is part of the story. Like, it's bad, but it influences Green Arrow and Arsenal's character development. It serves a narrative purpose. But Freedom Beast's death is just completely pointless. Congarilla was already sad. His tribe was gone. His human body was destroyed. There is no reason to kill off Freedom Beast other than adding extra shock value to a story that is already overflowing with it. And the thing is, this is ostensibly a story about Green Arrow and Green Lantern trying to be more proactive and do more than just fight supervillains. In practice, this means they wait around for Prometheus to do something evil, then Green Arrow murders him for revenge. But do you know who would be a perfect character for a story about proactive heroes? Freedom Beast! He's a proactive superhero with a history of fighting for a form of justice the League rarely pursues. Freedom Beast, I would argue, is the most wasted comic book character in DC's history. He had one excellent appearance in Animal Man, and then 20 years of wasted potential before an anticlimactic death in a terrible book. Perhaps he was too radical. Perhaps aggressively fighting for racial justice is too much for DC Comics. A hero who is so racist in concept that even his name is cringeworthy, that's fine. But actively fighting systemic racism, we can't have that in comics, no siree. And the thing is, Wannabeast isn't a forgotten kind of racist hero from the 60s. He's remembered. He appears in cartoons. He appears as a very well-written supporting character in Animal Man. He's still appearing as recently as this month in the comics. Freedom Beast has never appeared in any cartoon. Never appeared in any adaptation other than Scribblenauts Unmasked. Freedom Beast was never given a chance. He was never allowed to be part of the DC universe. And that's sad. Freedom Beast can briefly be seen as part of the Zombie Army in Blackest Night issue 8. DC also released a comic called Untold Tales from Blackest Night, showing deleted scenes from the event. In one scene, Animal Man disembowels zombie Freedom Beast. Freedom Beast was mentioned once more after his death in the 60th and final issue of Justice League of America Volume 2. In this issue, Congarilla leaves the Justice League so he can pass the helmet on to a new Freedom Beast. He also points out that Africa needs more love from the superhero community, and that the continent's varied countries have a lot of superheroes that the League has never even heard of. And this scene would work, except none of the heroes he mentions are real, because there really aren't a lot of African DC heroes. There are a few from Egypt, I guess, but other than that, African superheroes are rare in DC Comics. As an aside, someone at DC really needs to make Princess Knife, Ghost Fury, Shanty Saint, and especially Science Wiz Gulliver Satinwa actual superheroes, because those names are excellent. We wouldn't see another Freedom Beast because after this issue, DC rebooted as the New 52. In the first issue of the rebooted Justice League International, Buona Beast is seen on screen alongside a bunch of other possible candidates for the new team. He is one of the only heroes shown who isn't recruited. His existence implies that Dominic Mandawe doesn't possess the helmet in this continuity. Except, he does. Issue 8 of New 52 Midnighter, written by Steve Orlando, begins with men hunting a gorilla rhino ostrich chimera in the Rochester subway. Meanwhile, Dominic Mandawe travels to Rochester to interview Midnighter. Midnighter is called away to deal with the chimeras, and during the fight, some civilians are trapped under a truck. Enter Freedom Beast, sporting a new costume that actually has pants. He lifts the truck, saving the civilians, and interrupts Midnighter's fight with the chimeras. Freedom Beast diffuses the animals and explains who he is, which is good for readers since he hasn't been used properly in 27 years. Freedom Beast explains that the bad guys synthesized a version of his elixir to create chimeras to hunt and that he's come to stop them. An elephant leads the duo to the sportsman base, a fight breaks out, and Freedom Beast turns the main bad guy into Jeff Goldblum. Freedom Beast tells Midnighter not to kill the main bad guy and instead let nature take its course. Nature takes its course when a hungry bat shows up. This is a good story. It's nothing special, it's a Villain of the Week guest appearance, but Freedom Beast is actually important to the plot of the issue. He uses his powers. Orlando remembered that he's a journalist. He isn't killed off randomly to make Kongorilla sad. This is the second best appearance of Freedom Beast in DC history. Wow. That is really depressing when I say it out loud. Freedom Beast appears again in Justice League of America Volume 5, Issue 11, also written by Steve Orlando. Adam and Frost travel to Lumumba, Africa. I don't know if that's supposed to be the country or the city. Either way, it isn't a real place. It's named after Patrice Lumumba, a Congolese prime minister who was assassinated as part of a military coup. Gold star to anyone who guesses which three-letter agency was responsible for that death. Anyway, Adam and Frost arrive at the Mandawe Foundation, a think tank created by Dominic to figure out how to use his powers to help the world. Frost is dying as a result of her powers. Mandawe attempts to cure her using his powers in reverse, fission instead of fusion, to isolate her damaged genes. Finally, he can do the thing I wanted him to be able to do! Unfortunately, he is unable to help because Frost barely has any life force. Also, this means Freedom Beast and Buona Beast are far more powerful than they have been previously portrayed. They have the ability to split people apart as precise as DNA. Freedom Beast can give you cancer with his mind. At the end of Orlando's run, Frost and Adam, inspired by Freedom Beast, create a new think tank specializing in medical and technological innovation. And guess who's a member of this new Justice Foundation? That's right, Freedom Beast! This is a great idea. A Justice League book about superheroes fighting evils other than crime. A team who cures illnesses, fights famine, and helps rebuild the constantly destroyed DC cities. A team specializing in making the advanced technology of the DC universe available to everyone, not just a select few. A team who has the potential to fight evils the Justice League can't. The Justice Foundation has not appeared since. Nor has Freedom Beast. I mean, I get it. Why would anyone want a Freedom Beast book in the modern day? This idea, a black superhero fighting against systemic racism and police brutality, is something modern audiences can't relate to. Like, what would you even do with that kind of character in the modern day? Now, there's one more story to talk about. This one featuring Buona Beast rather than Freedom Beast. Bwana appears as a supporting character in Suicide Squad King Shark by Tim Seeley, which began in November 2021 and ended while I was filming this video. So I wrote this script during the first 2 weeks of January 2023, and when I saw the cover date January 2022, I said, hey, that's this month, because I am not smart. And it took me several edit passes of this script, recording it, editing it to cut the clips together, then editing it again to add the images and credits, before I realized that the current month is not in fact January of 2022. Not really. Comics are released a few weeks before their cover dates. Actually, that explains why the DC Comics Holiday Special had a cover date saying it was released in February. The point is, this is the most recent appearance of Beast. The comic focuses on, as its name implies, Suicide Squad member King Shark. It also stars Defacer, a supervillain who has the power of graffiti. Not like magic graffiti, ordinary graffiti. She's arrested and sent to Belle Rev for painting a dick on a statue of her ex-boyfriend, Nightwing. Oh, I just got that. She's putting a dick on Dick. Long story short, King Shark is summoned by the Red to fight in the Wild Games, a tournament of various animal people to determine what species will become Earth's new dominant life form. Defacer is sent along to keep an eye on King Shark and make sure humanity wins. The announcer of the games is none other than Beast, who understands that gender is a spectrum. Bwana attempts to kick Defacer out because she isn't fighting. Also, he asks if she's King Shark's lover. Defacer asks how that would even work, but I mean, it worked for John Constantine. Bwana decides to let Defacer stay, telling the Parliament of Limbs that the White God stands with her. She says that he should really retire the White God thing, and yes, he really should! The games are interrupted when Amanda Waller sends the Suicide Squad into the Red to drag King Shark back. One of the fighters asks Bwana to use his powers to fuse a bunch of them into one big fighter, but Bwana refuses. Although I think it's less because he can't, and more because he refuses to on principle. Regardless, he is knocked out by Etrigan. Hold on! Pause! Is this Vor? King Shark's dad sacrifices himself to save his son, and the Suicide Squad retreats. The games resume, and Beast drinks some mushroom tea, saying that he's a vegan, but he's still a fun guy. Honestly, I think Beast should make more dad jokes. King Shark wins, but minions of the Grey, the fungus equivalent of the Red, show up and infect everyone with mind-controlling spores. Beast resists the mind control with his powers, then uses his connection to the Red to reach into the minds of all the fighters, breaking them free from the mind control. In the end, the Grey is defeated and all of the fighters are chosen to be the future dominant species, including Defacer, resulting in a future superhero who thinks graffiti is a cool power. And also presumably Beast. He was soaked by the Well of Evolution too. This is the future of mankind! God help us! Beast isn't a very important character in Suicide Squad King Shark, but he appears and he's fun. He makes bad jokes, he wears a dumb bow tie, he helps save the day. It's a decent appearance. And at this moment, that is the final appearance of Beast. He'll appear again, eventually. But the question I'm left with is, should he?
Jumbo Bwana.
The answer to both of those questions is complicated. Freedom Beast should definitely appear again, preferably in a story where he does more than just stand around doing nothing. As for Bwana, well, the thing about comic book characters is that they aren't ever a singular person's vision. At the start of this video, I said that Beast was created by Bob Haney and Mike Sikowski, and that isn't quite true. He was created by them, yes, but he was also created by Grant Morrison, the Veitch brothers, and Joseph Kerr. Most of what I like about Beast comes from later writers. Characters are good if they're written by good writers. Like, the answer to the question, is Batman a good character, is not yes or no, it's maybe depending on who writes him. And even then, some writers can somehow both write a character really good and write them really bad, depending on the work. See David Goyer or Frank Miller, for example. Beast is good when in a story written by good writers. But almost every character can be good with the right writer. Why should good writers spend their time trying to fix a character with such a bad origin? I don't know. DC is filled with great characters who are underutilized. Characters who don't have Buona Beast's baggage. But Buona Beast has already been fixed. My complaints about the racism have largely been absent since the second part of this video. The character can work whether it's as a wacky weirdo like in Brave and the Bold, or as a dark horror character like in Animal Man's opening arc, or as a deconstruction of the character's racist origins later in Animal Man, or as the vessel for a very good villain like Antagon. Also, the New 52 hasn't explained how Buona is alive again. Maybe a story about him having PTSD over being Shining Man would work. Have there be some sadness behind that cheery face. Should Buona Beast appear again? Sure, if a good writer has a good story for him. Although, maybe they should change the name. Like, that's the biggest remnant of his racist origins. Just stop calling yourself Slave Master Beast. Call him Michael, or the Beast. Although maybe at this point the name is too synonymous with the character to drop. You don't have to keep using the White God nickname, though. That one definitely needs to be dropped! Also, writers should probably keep him out of Africa to keep the character separate from the white savior overtones, unless they're making a deconstruction like Swamp Thing Annual Number 3 or Animal Man 13. But I have to acknowledge that maybe there are better places DC's resources could be utilized. Every drop of time spent by writers and readers on characters like Buona Beast is time that could be spent elsewhere. Time spent shaving off racist elements of Buona Beast is time that is not spent creating stories featuring actual African heroes. And I'm as guilty of this as anyone. I've spent dozens of hours chronicling the history of a racist character from the 60s. But there are other DC heroes from Africa. There's Batwing, there's Dr. Mist, there's Computo. I barely know anything about any of these characters. Why didn't I make a retrospective on one of them? And to get away from the big two American companies, there are African superheroes made by people who live in Africa. South African artist Loyizo Mkhize created the superhero Kawezi in 2014. Maybe he's a good character. Ghana-based publisher Lady Arts has a character named Anazi who has spider powers. Maybe he's a good superhero. Nigerian publisher Comic Republic has a whole lineup of African superheroes, most notably their flagship hero, Guardian Prime. I read the first 6 issues of his series and it was fine. It would work better for the point I'm trying to make if it was really, really good, but yeah, it was just kind of fine. It was better than some of the DC stuff I read for this essay, at the very least. Should Buona Beast appear again? Sure. But a lot of characters should appear again. Look, here's my point. Buona Beast is a great character. He really, really is. I like him more as a character than I did when I decided to make this essay. Which is surprising, considering how bad his early issues are. But there are a lot of great characters out there. And for most of them, you don't have to ignore the horrible racism.
Jambo, jambo bwana, habari gani? Nzuri sana. Wageni, mwakaribishwa. Kenya yetu, hakuna matata.